When I think of Black History Month, I of course go back to Negro History Week, and a time, and I was in elementary school at the time, a time when I stopped learning Western history and got to hear and understand Negro history, Black history, and what it meant to be an African American. And so I hear in Black History Month the opportunity for us to do what the Bible tells us to do, and that is to tell the story. Tell it to our children and our children's children for generations to come. Because if we don't tell this story, it won't be told.
You know, names are always lost or often lost to history, but I think about the strength of people to come across the ocean, packed, in unimaginable conditions, and yet they came here and they were smart, and they were creative, and they were strong, and that every day, that's in me. And to be able to share that with other people, I think is so critical, right? That our story as Black people is integral to the American story.
People like Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr., Jesse Jackson, okay? All of them have played a real role with me as it relates to who I want to be and how I want to move through this society, through this world.
I certainly am thinking about the life and legacy of the legendary Reverend Jackson, who, he paved the way for even Barack Obama and the modern day, kind of heroes and sheroes that we look to today, not just in politics, not just in the legislature, but in every field of arts and science and music and finance and economics, and heads of state that we look to today. Those are the sources of our strength and our courage.
I would have to go back to Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, individuals who put education front and center. And it is something my own mother did with her 9 children. Education was paramount. And I learned from those individuals, and they were all quite different, Du Bois and Booker T. and Mary McLeod. But what they did to say to us as Americans, as Black Americans, education is important, was an inspiration for me.
So before there was a Reverend Jesse Jackson, there was a Congresswoman, Shirley Chisholm, who paved the way for him and so many others. So that's the reason why this is so special for me.
Althea Gibson in tennis, right? In the 1950s, here was this Black woman who had a ticker tape parade for her in New York City in the 1950s, who won Wimbledon and the US Open. You have James Baldwin, who was, the writer of the civil rights era, right? We think of these figures that we saw at podiums, but it was his words oftentimes. And then I think of people who achieved much and weren't given those opportunities to share in it, right? Like a Hattie McDaniel, who wins an Oscar in the 30s and she can't sit with her fellow actors. And this woman, not only did she win an Oscar, but also 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one for radio and one for motion pictures.
Well, I'm going to say, as it relates to Black history, my parents are part of that Black history because they weren't the ones whose names were in lights, in the history books that are now being deleted. These were regular folks who went to work every day, who instilled in their children a good work ethic, do the right thing, have integrity, get up early in the morning, that kind of stuff. And so there are so many millions of African Americans who don't have their names in lights, who don't have their names in books, but they were doing their part. They were raising their children. They were going to school. They were going to work. They were participating in their community.
My grandfather, Reverend Jeremiah Crawford, who had 14 children, 7 of whom became ministers. And my own parents, and particularly my mom and her, 4 of us became ministers. And the impact that those individuals had, my grandfather, who established a church in Alabama, Bell Baptist Church, and then established the Union Grove Baptist Church in the Bronx, both of which are still thriving congregations, has served as an inspiration for me and for my family and my children, and I think will be for a long time to come.
My father, David Evans, was a community activist for real, where we were 5, 6 years old on the telephone asking people, my dad said, do you need a ride to the polls today? Or my mom, who was a teacher, who would bring home students who would say, they're going to do their homework here today. So my parents, Celeste Evans, my mom, Dave Evans, my dad, to me, are heroes.
My mother was at those lunch counters in the 60s at Shaw University, fighting for the right to just be able to eat in a place that everyone else could eat at. And I want to make sure that, our descendants, right, have the right to live their fullest lives. And anything that detracts from that, we have to, as Americans, push back. And to be silent is to basically say what's happening is okay, and it's not okay.
In this very difficult season that we are in, where civil rights and civil liberties are being threatened, where these existential forces that call into question our own rights and our own history and our own journeys. And there is a movement afoot to erase that which has been achieved, that which we strove for. In one of my favorite musicals, the lyric is, look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. So pleased to be around right now to fight this battle. I think that our daughters and our sons are going to look back on us now and to say, what did you do? I want to be able to look around and say how lucky we are to be around to fight this out, and to draw on the strength from the warrior queens and kings that came before us